Tune in for a tale, words that set sail.
Digital Splendor, Literature Illuminated.
All right, today we're going to tackle a book that absolutely rocked the 18th century, Thomas Paine's The Age of Reason. Now, this is a work that got its author a ton of scorn, got him exiled, and gave him a reputation that honestly still follows him around. But as we're about to see, that's not even close to the whole story. I mean, for generations, The Age of Reason was a book you only talked about in whispers. It was seen as this dangerous, godless, atheist text, a book so scandalous that just owning a copy could land you in jail. It turned Thomas Paine, one of the great heroes of the American Revolution, into an outcast in the very country he helped bring to life. And look, this wasn't just talk. The backlash was real, and it was vicious. Paine was trashed in the press, he was condemned from every pulpit, and people were literally burning him in effigy, all for just daring to publish his thoughts on religion. But the real truth of why he wrote it, well, that's where things get really surprising. To really understand this book, you have to understand the man and the absolutely terrifying moment he was living in. The story of how this book even came to be is just filled with political chaos, revolutionary fire, and the constant, looming shadow of the guillotine. Okay, so this is where the popular myth just gets completely turned on its head. Paine wasn't trying to attack God. See, he was in France during the most brutal phase of their revolution, and he was watching the new government turn against not just the king, but against the church and religion itself. He was genuinely afraid that in this wreck of superstition, as he put it, people would lose sight of morality altogether. So his book wasn't an attack on faith, it was his desperate attempt to save the idea of God from the institution of the church. And the pressure he was under was just immense. In early 1793, he starts writing because he sees the revolution getting more and more hostile to religion. By October, his own political friends are being marched to the guillotine. He absolutely knew he was next on the list. Then, on December 28th, just 6 hours after he finishes the manuscript, the guards show up at his door. You have to understand, this wasn't some casual philosophical essay. This was his last will and testament to the world. And here it is in Paine's own words, just capturing the sheer drama of that moment. He literally hands the manuscript to his friend for safekeeping, just as he's being hauled off to prison, fully expecting that he was going to be executed. So what did he write that was so controversial? What were these core arguments against organized religion that caused such a massive uproar? Well, Paine's main target wasn't really faith. It was the structure of organized religion. He called national churches human inventions, things created by people for very earthly reasons, to control people, to hold on to power, and, to make money. He basically saw them as tools of the government, not as some pure connection to the divine. So what was his alternative? This famous line pretty much sums it up. Paine's whole argument was that our connection to God should be direct, it should be personal, and it should be based on our own ability to reason, not something dictated to us by a priest, a pope, or a king. And then he makes this really clever logical point about Scripture itself. He defines revelation as a direct message from God to one person. Simple enough. But he says the second that person tells somebody else what they heard, it stops being a revelation for everyone else. For them, it just becomes hearsay. So for you and me, reading the Bible isn't a revelation, it's an account of someone else's reported revelation. You're basically just taking their word for it. And building on that, he looked at Christian doctrines and saw not some unique divine story, but what he considered a rebranding of old pagan myths. A son of God born from a virgin. Pretty common in Greek myths about Jupiter. Saints for every possible problem. Kind of like the Roman pantheon of gods. For Paine, Christian theology was, in his words, the idolatry of the ancient mythologists accommodated to the purposes of power and revenue. So if Paine rejected the church, the Bible, and Christian doctrine, you might be thinking, was he an atheist? Absolutely not. He had a really deep belief in God. He just found his proof somewhere else entirely. Paine was a deist. He believed in one single creator God. He just rejected all of the stuff that came after, the rituals, the holy books, and the priests who claimed they were the only ones who could speak for that God. And this right here is the core of his positive vision. For Paine, the only true, uncorrupted, and universal holy book was the natural world itself. The universe, he argued, speaketh an universal language. It can't be forged, it can't be badly translated, and it reveals everything we could ever need to know about God's power and wisdom. So he presents this choice between two different kinds of theology. You have the church's theology, which is basically the study of what other humans have written and said about God in books. But what Paine called true theology was the study of creation itself. The real path to understanding the divine, he believed, was through science. Paine argued that science isn't some human invention that's a threat to religion. No, it's the other way around. The principles of math, of astronomy, of physics, those are the divine laws. Discovering them is an act of worship. He believed that an astronomer studying the stars is engaged in a much higher form of devotion than a priest just reciting old scripture. Okay, so let's move to the aftershock. How did this book, written by a man who thought he was about to die, actually go on to change the world? Well, it was a bombshell. It wasn't just ignored or brushed off as nonsense. The religious establishment took it incredibly seriously. We know of at least 36 major scholarly rebuttals that were published by bishops and top academics. That alone tells you how powerful and threatening they considered Paine's arguments. And the establishment fought back, hard. In Britain, people were thrown in prison just for printing or selling the book. It was considered so dangerous that the government basically declared war on it, which, kind of ironically, helped spark a decades-long battle for the right to a free press. But here's the unexpected twist. By attacking the Bible on the grounds of reason and evidence, Paine actually forced theologians to defend it on those same grounds. They couldn't just rely on divine authority anymore. And this started a long, slow process of reinterpreting scripture and liberalizing Christian thought, which helped lead to more moderate ways of thinking. Which leaves us with a really fascinating question to end on. Paine was destroyed for believing that morality can exist outside of one specific religion, that the universe is governed by rational laws, and that your own conscience is your ultimate spiritual guide. In his day, those were heresies punishable by prison. But how many of us today, religious or not, would just call that common sense?